This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenwald, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mara Donnelly. Mara, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Hi. So there's all sorts of interesting things happening in the Capitol these days and across the Commonwealth.
It's that time of year. Yeah.
We find that the judicial activities don't cease. Now we have Senator Washington, who is being brought up on some charges here. Yeah, that's interesting. Did you know about
I did, yeah.
What's going on behind the scenes?
I didn't know behind the scenes, though.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah, you have to really be in the know to know that.
But behind the scenes and behind the headlines, we do have a really good guest today who is there and who knows these things, and that is Dave Patti, who is the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. Welcome back, Dave.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Oh, it's nice to have you. As we come in to a new session, the legislators are returning, and we're looking forward to the gubernatorial election of 2014. Could you just give us a quick rundown of what the main issues will be for the Pennsylvania Business Council?
Sure. I mean, as we look now for it's the run up to the budget, really. You know, now that we're into spring. Of course, they were off a few weeks ago, you know, for the hearings and everything. And this is both the time when you look at fiscal issues, but then kind of the run up, particularly in the second year of a session, to getting anything that you want to get done has to be done almost by June of this year, because we'll be here very little in the fall with the election. Part and parcel with the budget, I think, for a lot of people is public pension reform, and still working to see if there's anything we can do, both for the pensions that the state pays for its state employees and for teachers. And the state contributes, but so do school districts. And a tremendous burden on public education and schools. And a big part of the funding debate is, well, we're also paying hundreds of millions of dollars collectively between the school districts and the state for those teacher salaries, and the teacher pensions. No one's saying that the teachers don't deserve the pensions. It was part of the deal. It's just the cost of carrying that anymore and the unfunded liability. So that's important. There was some good work a few weeks ago in the Pennsylvania House on the labor law front, trying to do something to stop labor unions from using violence as a tactic, and some, you know, taking a look at the criminal activities of some unions. And again, that's certainly not most organized labor, but there are a few bad actors out there, and making sure that we step in there.
We got some help from our judicial system on that one.
Right.
Yeah, and it was the way that Pennsylvania law was written.
Well, written a long time ago, not updated particularly, and frankly, you know, need to be updated in both in terms of employers and unions. You know, to always make sure that we're current. So I mean, that's appropriate. And I guess the third big thing is rumors have abounded for the last week or two that perhaps there's the ability to do something on liquor privatization.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Because it's time. The Senate leaders have floated some ideas. Various people in the business community, from beer distributors to taverns to restaurants to big box stores to small mom and pop to convenience stores, all have a stake in this and are looking for common ground. You know, it might be a way to actually bring revenues into the Commonwealth and provide more customer satisfaction, customer choice.
Oh, wow, that would be amazing if it happens.
It would be historic, really.
I love having you on the show so that we can talk politics. So we're going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about the governor's race.
Sure.
There's actually a lot of races we could talk about, but we'll focus on that one today. My big burning question for you is, who is Bob Guzzardi?
Bob Guzzardi is a southeastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia businessman who has been active in conservative circles for the last few years, last couple of election cycles, giving money to other candidates, and this time choosing himself to be a candidate.
Running against the governor.
He is challenging the governor in the Republican primary on the basis that Tom Corbett is not conservative enough, which must bring some viewers just to you know, aghast that such a possibility of a charge could even be made.
Such a thing is being said.
You know, but Mr. Guzzardi believes that Tom Corbett and his administration have failed to deliver on certain conservative principles or promises. You know, notwithstanding the fact that that I think that they have a great fiscal track record, they have made some real progress on other important initiatives. But that's his view and his take on this.
Since we're talking about the Republican primary, what have you seen in terms of the governor preparing for 2014? We've seen just a few commercials, and we wondered again behind the scenes what's happening on the governor's team. How are they shaping up for November if they win the primary?
Well, he's in great shape, both literally and figuratively. I think as he goes into the campaign, dropped about 30 pounds, and
looks good.
As I will say, getting into fighting trim. And I think having known the governor for about 20 years, he loves the challenge and loves the competition of a race, and rises to the occasion every time. The administration went through some changes last year in terms of communication staff and chief of staff and legislative staff, and I think that's served him well. Not that the other people had failed in any way in their jobs, but
different philosophy.
Different philosophy. Well, as you move through the progressions of the years, because the first year or two is different than the third and fourth year of an administration, and then the fifth year next year will be different yet. But the governor is out, as the incumbent, as all incumbents, gets to be gubernatorial, and talking about their initiatives, talking about their victories, doing a lot on job training and workforce development. I've been doing some events with him there, but doing a lot about the fiscal state of the Commonwealth. Certainly talking about education funding, the fact that we have more education funding from the state of Pennsylvania today than we ever had in state history. So while it may not be as much as some people would like, a lot of funding has been put there. And he's also talked, I think, and I think a lot of people who describe themselves as progressive were very, very pleased to hear him speak in the budget and repeat later in various public forums to the issue of the allocation, the way the money that we do spend, the more than $10 billion of state money, is allocated to the 500 school districts. So I think he's addressing a lot of issues, a lot of concerns. Of course, now we're into building season. We're starting to see the highway building take place that was promised by the infrastructure financing, so bridge work, road work going on.
We need to ask everybody to be patient. It's going to be a long spring and summer.
Yes, for all of us
it's all good.
I keep telling myself, when I'm stuck in traffic because of construction, I wanted this to happen.
Yes, I did this to myself. Yes. That's good, though. That's good.
Right. And so no, I think he's doing all the right things. He's out there and out and about, and has a great record to share with the people.
Well, on the Democratic side, there's a lot going on, and then there were 5. John Hanger has dropped out of the race, but we have Schwartz, McCord, Wolf, Wagner, and McGinty. So
sure.
Why don't we spend a few seconds on each of them? We'll start with who appears to be the front runner, Tom Wolf, at this point. I mean, I think the polling is showing that he certainly is out front on commercials, and everybody's seeing those. What do you think?
Tom Wolf loaned himself $10 million of his own money and to his campaign, and you can do a lot with $10 million.
You can.
And I admire that he's doing it the old-fashioned way, and I mean that actually in a somewhat complimentary sense. That the old days of politics, there were 4 steps. First, you identify who you are and get people to like you. Second, you identify what the issues are and your stand on those issues. Third, you contrast yourself, and this is the third step where you contrast yourself to the others in the race and their views on the issues. And fourth, you get out the vote. So often, everyone goes right to the contrast, which we know as negative ads.
Right.
But they don't establish who they are first. So he spent his money and his time this winter
and the commercials
to
are
do
playing
commercials
well.
so that people would introduce who is he, who is a family man, the business, and everything else. He's just like the rest of us. Grew up in a wealthy family, went to Dartmouth, Oxford, MIT, where he got his PhD, and ran a big company. Just like the rest of us.
Just your average Joe, but he does drive a Jeep.
But drives a Jeep, so what's not to like?
Yeah.
But people have warmed to him.
Yeah.
And you see
he's
that
got
in
a
the
beautiful
polling.
family, and
Wouldn't you say the quality of that particular ad has a lot to do with that?
Sure. I mean, but credit him for knowing what to do, and discredit the others for not having done it.
Yeah.
Congresswoman Schwartz jumped out to an early lead because she was the known entity, but she really stayed just within her base in the Southeast and in her comfort zone with very progressive constituencies. Did not expand her base beyond that. I think Rob McCord, the state treasurer, says, gee, I ran twice before, won both times. He started rolling up all of the traditional the labor endorsements and the various committee people so that he could go to the Democrat state committee and seek the endorsement.
Right.
But their rules are that you need 60% of the
Right.
votes. No one was going to get that. He pressed for...
Nobody got the endorsement.
He pressed for the
Yeah.
endorsement to prove that I have more votes than anybody else. But so what? That's an
Yeah.
insider game that just doesn't matter
Yeah.
in with the populace. And with only 5 of them, you look at this and say, all right, let's say they all start with 10 or 12% that's their established base. That's 50 to 60% of the vote. So they're really only fighting over the other 40% of the vote, carving that up, and somebody could win this with 30%, easily.
Well, and McGinty got out front with commercials as well, but she hasn't seemed to have gained any traction with hers.
I think that she surprised a lot of people by raising more money than we thought she had the ability to do. She loaned herself a small amount of money, does not have the personal wealth that Tom Wolf has. Tried to be kind of trendy with the iPhone commercials and all that kind of stuff, and go to the hipsters. Well, I don't know what part of the Democrat primary electorate is the hipster vote. So frankly, I can't say that she's wrong. I think the interesting one was Jack Wagner, who sat out the whole early phases, got in towards the end. Everybody knows that he doesn't raise a lot of money. But he has statewide name ID. He was Auditor General twice.
But he announced, and then
the only guy from Western Pennsylvania, and he's I will say, I don't know if he would say this, he's by far the most conservative of the group.
Isn't he using the Rudy Giuliani strategy of running for higher office? You wait until halfway through and then jump in. Of course, it didn't work very well for Rudy for the presidency. What do you think with Jack Wagner? Will he still butt heads with the Rendell people? Is that
well, he has already, even when Hanger got out a couple of weeks ago, he endorsed everybody but Jack Wagner. So I think that's always the case. Jack is a Marine Corps combat wounded veteran, decorated veteran of Vietnam. He is pro-life. He's a Western Pennsylvanian in every sense. The business community across the state really, has always loved him. We've always thought very highly of him. For Western Reagan Democrats, he would be their candidate. If they look at the records of everybody, he's their candidate. So what part of the Democrat primary electorate is that anymore? I don't know if that gets him to victory. I don't know if it's a path to victory, but it's a credible path.
Yeah. I think we have maybe 30, 15 seconds. I'm not really sure exactly. But if the governor came to you today and said, what advice do you have for me? What would you say?
Stick to the knitting. He just be the governor, keep being the governor. They're in the right position on all of the issues. I think most Pennsylvanians like the issues. Now they just have to identify him with the issues and like his leadership on those issues.
Stick to the knitting.
And handicapping in March, who do you think wins the Democratic primary?
It's Wolf is certainly a strong leader.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're sorry we put Dave on the spot there.
We have more to talk about. We got to come back.
But he'll be back very soon, and we'll pick up this discussion of the gubernatorial race. You'll be hearing lots of it as the year progresses. We'll be right back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines. Stay tuned.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Maura and I are going to be talking about one of the interesting new ideas in higher education that's being circulated on Capitol Hill. And for this idea and to talk about it, we have two of the best people in the Commonwealth. One, of course, we have Steve Hicks, who's the president of APSCUF. Steve has been here many times. Welcome back. Of course, APSCUF being the union of our faculty members at our 14 state-owned universities. And we're being joined as well by Lisa Millhous, who's the APSCUF president at the local chapter at Westchester University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great opportunity.
Why this idea that has, Lisa, why don't you tell us about this idea of possible secession, that some of the state universities might be able to go private and leave the 14-state system university, and your university is being mentioned. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the background behind this idea?
There's a bill that's been proposed in the Senate that would allow what is currently a state-owned institution to purchase back the land and the buildings from the state and become state-related rather than being a state-owned institution. And
state-related like Pitt and Temple and Lincoln.
Lincoln, yes.
Penn State.
And so this comes out of Westchester. It's clearly driven by some of the issues that Westchester feels, that there's a little bit too much control from Paschi in Harrisburg, and that we're struggling to try and make ends meet with a lot of the bureaucracy that's happening. So I think it's coming out of some of the feelings that are happening in Westchester. Westchester's not the only school that is looking at it as a possibility.
How does this help? How does this help Westchester if they do secede?
Well, yeah. What the proponents, I don't know for sure that it will help Westchester, because it does take us out of a larger system. The proponents of the bill are saying that it will reduce the red tape that we have to build buildings or to get curricular decisions made from the state level. They're saying that it will allow us to increase tuition, which they seem to feel is necessary at this time, and it removes some of the oversight that the state has and some of the transparency. So you can see why that might be appealing, but I'm not sure necessarily that that's a good thing for the institution.
I think if I could interject here, that Westchester, there's a side that says these are helpful things, but there are also the downside. For one thing, you're probably going to change the tuition model from being the most affordable four-year education in the Commonwealth to something that's at least slightly more, but it definitely more to fill in expenses. And the next thing is you're going to take about 16,000 seats out of the state system from those in Chester and Delaware counties and Montgomery counties who go there are going to start looking for another low-cost option. So the whole dynamic of what Westchester University does in recruiting is probably going to change. So I think that's, Westchester University, which is now part of the low-cost option, is going to move up a tier, and so that's going to change the whole dynamic, I think. And I think that's part of the hope of the people proposing it, but it's also our fear that change of dynamics going to mean there's less opportunity for a low-cost, high-quality education for students in that area particularly.
Stephen, I can't imagine that in the long run that this is going to be a better situation for individual educators, for your members, being out of a larger group of people that provides assistance and help to one another. What are the ramifications for APSCUF?
Well, I think as a union, I don't know that we really are too concerned with those issues right up front. I think we're more worried about education and students and how that works. The system shares a whole lot of things at this point. They share a payroll, they share administrative software, they share a library network, they share an athletic conference, I could go on. Well, we share health care. Everybody is in the same health care. All those things are by the wayside with this legislation with a state-related Westchester or who else goes along with them. The legislation makes 9 of our institutions eligible to leave the system. So
why just 9? Why not
just
all 14?
9? It seems from the legislation that they were shooting for a size factor. They thought the legislation talks about having more than 7,000 students. So they clearly thought that you needed to be 7,000 students to be large enough to be an individual unit. And there is no magic in the number 7,000. It's artificial and arbitrary. It would clearly give a lot of our schools that opportunity, but there are very successful 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 person universities, and there are very successful ones less than 7,000. So there's not like there's a magic in that number. So.
Well, the whole idea behind the state system is to grant access
Right.
on a statewide basis to students. In
112,000 this
right,
year. Right.
In an affordable manner. And if you give 9 of them the ability to go off and do their own thing and become their own entity, the entire concept is out the window, that we have a state system that's affordable and accessible for all the students.
That's right. Act 188 that created this system says we're supposed to provide a quality, affordable education. Right. And if you let the 9 have some independence on their tuition, you have to be concerned that there won't be as many affordable seats as there used to be in a time when we all talk about we need more education and more people getting degrees instead of fewer.
Well, Lisa and Steve, affordability comes into view here too, because Senator Dinniman said that the tuition would not increase if Westchester were state-related any more than it would at any of the other state system schools. Is that in the legislation? Is there a way to assure that that would happen, Lisa?
I think the legislation suggests that when we get an appropriation as a state-related, if we were to go that route, that we would have a suggested tuition rate. But the reality is there's a big loophole that says that if the appropriation isn't enough to cover it, then we can charge more. And the indication, Senator Dinniman suggested that $550 increase for the first year, which is a 9% increase, would be likely. And there's no reason to expect that it wouldn't be higher than the cost of inflation going into the future. Everything points to higher tuition. We have to buy back the buildings and the land. We don't have the benefit of the economies of size. Students would be likely to not be able to transfer in as many classes because articulation agreements wouldn't work. And then would we follow our state-related peers then and charge more for certain programs or for juniors and seniors? I mean, everything is pointing to increased tuition for students.
Well, the supporters of the bill and the prime sponsor have said that this is a means to open the discussion on the state system. It seems like a pretty extreme way to go about beginning this discussion. But clearly, if there are some issues with some of the universities that are struggling, then you do need to address a few issues. Do you want to talk about some of the ideas or what might be going on?
Well, can I start with your point about it seems an extreme way to go?
It does.
I have to say that in my office it's known as the bazooka that's been taken to the water gun fight. So it does seem like an extreme way to go. So you want to talk about the...
But it's definitely gotten the discussion going. I mean,
it definitely has.
They can say that.
I mean, I think we do need reforms. There is a lot of red tape. We've got a building that's 2 years behind. We raised the money to build the building. Now it costs more to build the building because we couldn't start building it 2 years ago when we had the money. So we've set up a lot of red tape. We do need to do something. But I don't see that raising the tuition and taking us out of the larger group is going to actually solve the problems that we really do need to look at.
I think the legislation does start a discussion, and clearly we have been on the side that says we do need the Dixon Center to be more transparent and to be more responsive. I think the new Chancellor, Chancellor Brogan, has started some programs, some pilot programs on tuition that may give some flexibility on tuition to the institutions, and that looks like a positive. And he's also changed the conversation on things like a weapons policy, that instead of imposing their will on 14, right now they're sitting, and he came out in public about a week ago saying they may just let the 14 decide each individually what to do about such things. Those are good signs coming from the Dixon Center, and I think the senators who've proposed this, it would be good if they could sit down with the Chancellor and talk about some of the issues, and maybe he can find a way to make some of this work.
So Chancellor Brogan didn't really get much of a grace period when he signed up for Pennsylvania, did he?
Well, no, and I know how he feels, having been there. And, the honeymoon was pretty short when I started, and when Dr. Kavanaugh started. Higher ed's a very fluid place to be these days. There's always some adjustment, whether it has to do with state appropriations and budget, or it's in people wanting to do with things with the curriculum. And the governor's commission isn't 2 years old yet, and they talk more about job orientation and fitting in with the community and performance funding. And none of those things have been brought up or talked about or enacted, but there are all those ideas out there pushing higher ed, and people talk about professors and universities not being malleable or changeable, and from where I sit, it seems to change constantly, and it's really a flowing river. So I think it's.
Let's end the show. We have just end the segment. We have just a few seconds left. But Lisa, if the faculty members at Westchester took a vote among themselves today, what would the vote be, to secede or to?
I think it would be difficult, but I do think that there are more that are opposed than are for. But there is debate and there is disagreement.
Mm-hmm. So, and is this debate also occurring at other state system schools, Steve?
Well, at the press conference last week, there were senators from Millersville and Shippensburg represented. So we understand that at least those two places are having some conversation. Doesn't seem to be as serious as what they're doing at Westchester, but at least we know at least the tease is out there. And obviously with legislation as it's drafted, there are going to be 9 places having that conversation to figure out what the pluses and minuses are, and whether they could stand to leave the system or not.
Okay. Well, thank you both for being with Maura and me. We appreciate it, and we'll look to see you again next week right here on Behind the Headlines.